Mr. Deputy and Senators, good morning. In a few days, we will be celebrating Mother's Day. And many persons will go the extra mile to honor their mothers in their lives. And so today I want to talk to you about generosity. But what about the other days in the year? I ask you, Senators, are you genuinely generous? John Maxwell said, effective leaders, the kind that people want to follow, don't gather things just for themselves. They do it in order to give to others. Hebrews 13:16 states, and do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices, God is pleased. What does your generosity and giving record look like? Do you give out of duty or obligation? Do you give to gain favor over others? Do you give because you are blessed and enjoy giving? What motivates your giving muscle? Today I share two thoughts with you. The first one is this. I encourage you to give out of a heart of gratitude. Reflect on your mother, grandmothers, and the many women whose sacrifices have made the way better for you and those who come behind. Call to mind the many open doors, favors, and blessings that has given you wonderful opportunities to sit as parliamentarians in this season in the life of our country. Let your mind go back to your beginnings and to examine where you are right now. Are you blessed? Has God been good to you? 2 Corinthians 9:11 and 12 states, you will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. As you give to your mothers, adopt a spirit of generosity year-round. Secondly, regard your resources and blessings as tools that have been entrusted to you. Richard Foster said, just the very act of letting go of money or some other treasure does something within us. It destroys the demon greed. Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Many times we can be tempted to only acquire for ourselves and think about a small group. But have you ever paused to realize that all we receive in life is only for a season and cannot be carried from this realm? Therefore, it is imperative to be good stewards of what you have been entrusted with. It is easy to be generous with other people's stuff. But what about your stash? Do you use your resources and influence to open doors for others so that they can come into their own, no strings attached? Do you remember to make time to call, spend time with your mother, family members, and mothers in your life to express your care and appreciation of them? Do you look for little and big ways year-round to affirm and express your love to the mothers in your life? Will you bless some mother privately and secretly who needs to be encouraged at this challenging time of her life? And do you give in secret to preserve the dignity of the less fortunate in our society so that God gets glory? I close in this way. Luke 12:48b says, from everyone who much has been given, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, much will be asked. And so, Senators, cultivate a spirit of generosity that will enrich the lives of others. Develop your generosity muscle and be a good steward of all that God has entrusted to you. And never take your mother or the dear mothers in your life for granted. Look for ways regularly to bless them, affirm, and express your love to them. Let us pray. Dear Lord Jesus, we give you thanks for the gift of motherhood. We pray for the mothers of the Senate and each senator who is a mother. We remember the mothers who are died, living and dead. And we pray for all the mothers of the Bahamas. Develop within each senator a spirit of generosity and a grateful heart. And may they be good stewards with all they have been entrusted. Bless, preserve, and keep them. In the precious name of Jesus we pray. Please join in the prayer of our Lord. Our Father, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning. As usual, Madam Chaplain, thank you very much for your blessings over the Senate proceedings and giving us that word of encouragement and guidance. Thank you very much. Adoption of minutes.
Morning. Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I move that the minutes of the session of the Senate held on Thursday, the 2nd of May 2024, be adopted.
Second.
As many? Second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the minutes of Thursday, 2nd of May 2024 be adopted. Motion for leave of absence. Leave to resign. Swearing in of new senators. Communication by the President. Message from the Governor General. Message from the House of Assembly.
Passage from the House of Assembly.
Bahamas number 11. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bills and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to make provisions for maintaining public safety and order by discouraging membership in gangs, suppressing and punishing gang-related activities, and for connected purposes. A bill for an act to amend the Penal Code. House of Assembly, Nassau, 17th April 2024. Sylvanus Petty, Deputy Speaker, fourth Speaker. Bahamas number 15. Message to the Honorable the President and Honorable members of the Senate from the Speaker and representatives of the Honorable House of Assembly. The House of Assembly acquaints the Honorable the Senate that they have passed the following bills and desire the consent of that Honorable Chamber, namely, a bill for an act to amend the Supreme Court Act to provide authority for the making of rules to regulate the active management of civil and criminal matters before the court. A bill for an act to grant a right of election to persons charged with indictable offenses in the Supreme Court to be tried by judge alone, and for the consequential amendment of miscellaneous provisions of law and for connected purposes. House of Assembly, Nassau, 8th May 2024. Patricia DeVoe, Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I beg leave to lay on the table of the Senate a copy of the following: the Passport Amendment Rules 2024, the Public Debt Management Bahamas Registered Stock Number 2, 2025 Directions 2024, and the Court of Appeal Annual Report 2023.
presentation of petitions, appointment of select committees, reports of select committees, first reading of bills, second reading and committal of bills, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ryan Pinder.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I want to welcome you in that esteemed chair. I am very, very proud that you are there. The promotion is well deserved. The promotion is well deserved. The only thing that is missing is the esteemed robe with all the tassels and the glorious wig that extends down to your shoulders. A predecessor for a King's Council appointment, you could have tried it on and looked so esteemed today. You're welcome. Mr. Presiding Officer, good morning. Today, I rise to move for the second reading of the Electricity Bill 2024 and the Natural Gas Bill 2024 to be debated today in a compendium. These are two fundamental pieces of legislation for the reform of energy generation, supply, transmission, and distribution throughout the country. We need transformational reform to ensure that clean, affordable, reliable energy is provided in the Bahamas. Today's contribution, I will give an overview of the bills, and I'll provide some insight into the current conditions of BPL. And then I'll speak about some of our energy reform initiatives that are currently underway. The Electricity Act was passed in 2015 in the context of a proposed management arrangement for BPL and the statutory introduction of the concept of a rate reduction bond. As a result of the poor governance of the former administration and poor decisions that were made, the management company framework nor the rate reduction bond ever materialized for BPL. And in our opinion, setting it back considerably in its progress towards modernization. As a result, there are specific obligations found in the Electricity Act and the Electricity Rate Reduction Bond Act that were not complied with. So in other words, because of their failure to implement the law, BPL found itself and the government in contravention of the law that was passed in 2015. Given the evolution of the state of affairs of energy generation, transmission, distribution, and supply, there is a need to update the Electricity Act in its entirety. The Office of the Attorney General has consulted extensively with the Ministry of Energy, with ERCA, and BPL regarding the proposed amendments and modifications to the Electricity Act. And given the number of revisions that were required, it was decided to do a full repeal and replace of the Electricity Act with the bill we debate today, the Electricity Bill 2024. Amendments contained in the bill include the removal of references to the obligation to have a system operator, which is the management company, and the removal of specific references to a rate reduction bond, because clearly that has not happened and is not going to happen. It also permits a licensee to engage a system operator of their choice, so a management company, for the management and operation of any or all of the generation, transmission, distribution, or supply of energy. Such system operator, however, such management company must be a licensee under the Act, so they are a regulated entity. Before, they did not have to be a regulated entity. So imagine having a management company managing a regulated activity without itself being regulated. The logic doesn't line up. The changes also provide that the provision of electricity must be done in an environmentally sustainable manner. That's very important. The environment is what we have and is what we live and is what contributes so much to the betterment of the country. We see what is happening at BPL and Clifton Pier with the pollution. So now it is a legislative mandate to provide electricity in an environmentally sustainable manner. The bill also provides a mechanism for the minister to temporarily adjust tariff rates for the benefit of vulnerable classes of consumers. There's a 3-year period in which they are permitted to do this. It also provides for enhanced competition in the electricity sector. With competition comes better service, lower prices to the consumers, and more reliability. We should encourage competition in the electricity sector. The bill also promotes energy efficiency programs amongst its licensees. So the licensees have to implement energy efficiency in their programs, which is only going to result in benefits to the consumer. If I generate energy more efficiently, the price that I'm selling energy at comes down. There are strong consumer protection provisions in this electricity bill we debate today. This bill is about providing benefits to the consumer, and it creates the regulatory framework to ensure benefits are extended to the consumer. It provides alternative dispute resolution mechanisms amongst licensees. It allows for the first time off-grid solar systems in areas that may be currently serviced by a public utility. So you can go and get permission to be off-grid if you want. It also allows for IRCA's right for the inspection of licensees to make sure they're compliant with the Act. The new bill includes new licensing categories for transmission and distribution providers. So now all elements of the value chain of providing electricity, from generation all the way to its distribution, are licensed activities. It provides specifically for the provision of hurricane reserves to protect our infrastructure in the event of hurricanes, and is the first piece of legislation in the Bahamas to provide for the regulation of artificial intelligence. In this case, artificial intelligence used in the electricity sector. Trust me, we will start seeing more and more of this incorporated into our regulatory legislation. There's no controversy about the amendment and updating of the Electricity Act with the Electricity Bill 2024. I think it important to emphasize that during the entire drafting process of the bill, the regulator, that is IRCA, was completely engaged, and every revision made was consulted upon with them. And in many instances, the revisions made are as a result of recommendations from the regulator themselves. That is how regulatory legislation is done. We're pleased to put forward the Electricity Bill 2024. With respect to the Natural Gas Bill 2024, we must be mindful what it covers. Natural gas, and in its liquefied form, liquefied natural gas, or LNG, is a form of fuel that is used for many purposes. In the context that we discussed today, we are discussing the use of that fuel, natural gas, for the generation of energy, electricity. LNG, although not regarded as a renewable fuel or resource, it is regarded as a much cleaner fuel than what we now use today, which would be diesel or heavy fuel oil, which is the cheaper form of fuel we use, but a heavy pollutant. In our blueprint for change, I remind that we pledged to transition our power generation to LNG fuel, a cleaner source of fuel. So the desire for our government and BPL to move to LNG-fueled generation should not be a surprise to anyone. It's in black and white in our blueprint for change. In the Bahamas today, now listen to this, in the Bahamas today, as we know, there is no regulatory framework for LNG fuel. None. Doesn't exist. However, LNG fuel today is being imported, used, and transported throughout our jurisdiction without regulation. Wow. Today. LNG fuel is being used in the Bahamas. And it's anticipated to be utilized in other ways going forward. For example, currently, today, imported fuel, LNG is imported and used as fuel for electricity generation in private developments. They have, right in your home island, they have electricity generation facilities, power plants, powered by LNG fuel without regulation. Without regulation of the fuel. Without regulation of bringing it into the country. Without regulation of safety of handling the fuel. Without regulation if it has to be blended, if it comes in ISO tanks, how it comes. And without regulation on how it is ultimately pumped into the generation unit. That is happening today in the Bahamas. Today. It is anticipated and has been approved already for ship-to-ship LNG bunkering in Freeport. I think that was in the paper some 6 months ago. Unregulated, as far as the LNG goes. We are looking for the conversion of additional generation for BPL, fueled by LNG. That's our anticipation. I just said it's in our blueprint for change. To support the supply of LNG for BPL generation, which is a utility scale generation and fuel, a facility is contemplated to support the importation, gasification, and storage of that LNG fuel to be built in the Bahamas, obviously, and in Nassau. You need to regulate that activity. Our Family Island microgrid power generation project, many of those facilities are going to be utilizing LNG as a source of fuel. Why? It's cleaner, it's more cost effective, and in the ways of transportation now, they transport it in what's called ISO tanks, but these big tanks on trailer beds, tractor trailers. The transportation is easier with LNG. And so we're seeing, and I'll speak to it a little later, that the microgrids that are going on in the Family Islands are going to be powered by LNG as well. We have to get the LNG there, so you're going to have inter-island transportation of LNG for that power generation. All of these elements now are a new aspect of LNG fuel that requires regulation. That is the basis. That is the basis for the bill we debate today, the natural gas bill. The scope of current and anticipated activity involving LNG fuel demands a regulatory framework for every stage of the value chain for LNG fuel. It is proposed that ERCA be the designated regulator for natural gas in the Bahamas. And the proposed natural gas bill that we debate today has been drafted in coordination with IRCA and their expert consultants. Again, the way you approach regulatory legislation is in tandem with the regulator. And the regulator in this instance was with us from the first word on the paper. The Natural Gas Bill 2024 reflects a global benchmark of natural gas regulation and international best practices. We looked all over the world and benchmarked all the regulatory frameworks for LNG regulation for this piece of legislation. This ain't no Mickey Mouse show, you know. This ain't no Mickey Mouse show. We don't just slap things together on this side.
Not this AG. Well thought of. Benchmarking.
This is internationally benchmarked against the US, against London, against the European Union, against UAE, against Singapore, all of the major regulatory countries that regulate LNG, this was benchmarked against. This ain't no Mickey Mouse operation over here. The objective of this act the objectives are to establish a legislative framework to regulate the importation, regasification, shipping, transportation, and retailing of natural gas to ensure that these activities are performed in a safe, efficient, effective, economic, and environmental manner. To promote the access to gas in an affordable and safe manner. The objective is to provide higher fuel efficiency at lower costs for consumers. This is all around bringing reliable, cost-effective energy to the consumer. And the objective is to promote the global effort at reducing emissions that contribute to global climate change and thus serving to sustain our environment, the environment of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for all current and future generations. The key provisions of the bill are summarized as follows, and I'll just run through them. Part 1 of the bill provides for its broad scope of application and establishment of a natural gas sector policy and objectives. Part 2 of the bill provides for the administration of the Act, including designating IRCA as the regulator of natural gas activities in the Bahamas. IRCA is granted a broad range of regulatory powers, including inspection and due diligence requirements and the maintenance of a public register of licensees. So ain't nothing happening under the cloak of darkness here. If you are dealing in LNG in the Bahamas, you have to be licensed, and that being a licensee will be listed on a public register for all to see. Part 3 of the bill provides for the licensing of the natural gas sector. And the activities that require a license are as follows. You need a license to import. You need a license to build and operate LNG terminals and natural gas pipelines. You need a license to ship natural gas, to retail natural gas, and to perform any other activity in natural gas that IRCA so designates. There's also a requirement for the issuance of a license for a natural gas service worker. This is very specialized. And so those working in the industry will be trained appropriately and duly licensed. The procedure for making, processing, and determining applications for licenses is different when you're talking about a natural gas service worker than if you're talking about a participant in the industry or the vertical chain that I call it. These requirements and qualifications are set out in Part 3. The grant of licenses can include conditions on the specific type of licenses as the regulator may determine. Part 4 of the bill provides for the rights and duties of licensees and gas service workers, and this includes the requirements and duties, for example, of a gas transporter, a gas retailer, and provides for the health and safety requirements of those that are participating in the industry. Part 5 of the bill provides for the general prohibition of anti-competitive agreements and practices. So again, just like in the electricity sector, where the electricity bill is promoting competition and has a consumer protection element, as does the natural gas bill, because the provision of the fuel has to be on a competitive basis. Otherwise, you're creating the opportunity to inflate the cost of fuel that is a fundamental element to the generation of electricity. Makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
Part 6 of the bill provides for the merger and control of participants in the industry. You want to know who is in your industry.
Yep.
This is a volatile substance. It is a fuel. It is in the national interest. And so any change in control or merger has to be at the consent and approval of the regulator, ERCA. Like the electricity bill, this bill deals with consumer protection. In fact, every public gas supplier shall submit to ERCA for approval a plan proposing standards for protection of its gas consumers. So not only do you have an obligation, you have to demonstrate that obligation to the regulator by putting forward a plan on how you're going to protect the consumers. And that has to be approved. Part 8 of the bill provides for the framework and the investigations and enforcement of ERCA as the regulator. Part 9 of the bill creates the obligation, if you feel aggrieved, to appeal to the Utilities Appeal Tribunal. And then the last part, Part 10, provides for the offenses and the fines and the penalties related to the obligations under the legislation. Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer, the Natural Gas Bill of 2024 is a necessary piece of legislation that imposes a regulatory framework on the entire vertical value chain involving natural gas. It is urgent because we have activities ongoing in the country now,
Right now.
involving natural gas. Right now, for years. For years. My good friend over there could tell you, he's familiar, it happens on his island. It is urgent because we have these activities that must have oversight.
Right away.
The bill is internationally benchmarked and consistent with international best practices. I want to thank ERCA for their cooperation on the development of the natural gas bill and their commitment of time and resources to see that it was completed. We can expect very shortly regulations to be issued by ERCA for public consultation. They have a consultation period as the regulator, 30 days. Those should be released very shortly with respect to LNG and the framework we passed today. Those who do not support this passage of this bill today support cowboy activity within the fuel provision in this country. Yes. That's what they support. Unregulated cowboy activity.
Happening now.
Not on this side.
All right.
We'll have to wait and see what they do today.
All right.
We'll have to wait and see what they do today. Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer, with respect to BPL and the energy reform, let's speak a little bit about generation. BPL has a severe generation constraint, and the picture is not looking good and not getting any better anytime soon under the status quo. When I say severe, I mean severe. For those who don't know, BPL operates 29 power stations on 17 different islands. It is a safe estimate that 60% of BPL's plant in New Providence and 80% in the Family Islands, 80% of BPL's plants in the Family Islands need to be replaced within the next 5 years. 5 years. due to generation engines being at or near the end of their useful life. Let me say that again. 60% of the plant in Nassau and 80% of the plants in the Family Islands need to be replaced in the next 5 years because those engines are reaching or have reached the end of their useful life. And to give you an understanding of the numbers we're talking about on the generation side, accounting for contingencies, industry contingencies, at least 340 megawatts is needed in New Providence. Okay. That is to account for the peak load, and the peak load was 281 megawatts last year in 2023, plus what we call the N-2 contingency. What that means is you have to have extra capacity in case your two largest engines go down. You still have to be able to cover the capacity. So that's what N-2 means. So that's how we get to the number of 340 megawatts is required in New Providence. We also anticipate year over year a 5% growth in energy demand. So every year our demand for energy, whether that be because we're putting more things in our house or whether that be because there are new developments being built, whatever the reason for the demand, we're anticipating and forecasting a growth of demand of 5% a year. So we have our number. We have 340 megawatts. We have a peak load of 281 megawatts. Those are the facts. As to the generation needs of BPL, what they need for generation, BPL requires a replacement for 113 megawatts of rental generation. Let me tell you that. Listen to that. BPL is renting generators. Renting them, not owning them. Renting generators of 113 megawatts. And they have 203 megawatts of aged or obsolete generators in their fleet. 203 megawatts that are obsolete or near obsolete. 113 megawatts that are rented. Rented. So let's look at those numbers again. More than 40% of the peak load, is rented by BPL. They're barely in the energy generation business today. And over 72% of the peak load that BPL owns needs replacement. You want to know why we say we are in a dire strait? That's why. It is estimated in New Providence alone, BPL needs more than $211 million to replace just its aging fleet. Just its aging fleet. $211 million. And to incorporate renewables and to facilitate maintenance and overhauls. The story in the Family Islands isn't much better. At least 100 megawatts of new generation is needed in the Family Islands. 100 megawatts in the Family Islands. To account for the replacement of 32 megawatts is rented through the Family Islands. 32 megawatts rented. And to replace their aged and obsolete fleet. And also to account for load growth. Those familiar with the islands, my good friend across the way can tell you, that there are developments going on throughout our archipelago on different islands. My friend from Long Island can tell you. There's envisioned massive projects down in Long Island. Because of that development reallocation amongst our islands, you also need extra load. BPL anticipates needing more than 80 million for new generation in the Family Islands. 80 million. So let's see, that is an immediate need of almost $300 million just to replace current generation. Current generation. Current generation, which is also insignificant to meet the current demand loads plus our contingencies. So we don't even have what we need, yet what we have to replace to the tune of $300 million. That's the facts. Those are the facts. Notwithstanding the above, BPL has a current generation shortfall. Taking into account the contingency requirements, that shortfall is 64.4 megawatts today. That's the generation shortfall of BPL, 64.4 megawatts. And if all things stayed the same, say nothing changed, increasing that 64, that shortfall, will increase to 130 megawatts in just 5 years. Shortfall. So let's say we do as they did and not touch a thing. Just as they did. We don't touch a thing. In 5 years, BPL will have a generation shortfall of 130 megawatts. 130 megawatts.
That's unnecessary for you to say that we didn't touch a thing, man.
The new generation requirements for BPL.
You know what we did with Whatzilla and everything else.
Oh, you want to talk about Whatzilla? We could talk about Whatzilla. We could talk about Whatzilla.
What I'm trying to say is stop misleading the public unnecessarily.
The new generation requirements for BPL
Just stop that. That ain't necessary.
are dire. Dire.
Make your case.
And the cost to acquire new generation to meet this demand and replace rentals and the aging fleet is prohibitive. Let's be honest. My friend can tell you we got $300 million. BPL cannot afford the cost of new generation, nor can the government. This is the unfortunate reality we find ourselves in. The fact is, we need a new paradigm for the generation supply in this country. The high reliance on rental generation by BPL has also caused for exorbitant costs to be imposed on BPL, much of which is not passed on to the consumer. So it's a sunk cost. We call that a sunk cost. Listen to this. Renting generators costs BPL $32 million a year in New Providence, a year, and more than $10 million annually in the Family Islands, totaling more than $42 million a year to rent somebody else's generators. Just to rent them. This is unsustainable. It's an unsustainable practice for BPL, and it is unsustainable for the electricity and energy security of the country. That's a fact. So what are we going to do about it, Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer? We have a reform plan for BPL, a reform plan that is supported by the board of BPL. Transitioning to cleaner, more efficient fuels is pivotal for the Bahamas, positioning us as a regional leader in the energy generation transition. We are actively exploring renewable and efficient energy solutions, including solar, powering by LNG, for a cleaner and more cost-effective future. Tailoring our energy solutions to each island's specific challenges and capabilities, we are seeking for the production of 27 megawatts of solar throughout our Family Islands. The first time, we are doing industry-level solarization and renewables through BPL. And at least 60 megawatts, up to 100 megawatts of solar in New Providence, with an additional 15 megawatts of commercial and residential solar opportunities in the future. So our transition to renewables and solar is real. It's happening now. This supports our commitment that is unwavering and a plan and path as we move forward to 2030. We move to reduce the energy burden on our most vulnerable communities and improving generation supply and reliability. That's the goal. To achieve our goals, so those are our goals. To achieve our goals, we have underway certain reforms, energy sector reforms. These include, with respect to renewable energy, we have a commitment to start our transition now to renewable energy. The government of the Bahamas has issued a request for proposal inviting independent power producers to bring more renewable energy options to be interconnected into our grid. This initiative provides a green energy solution for our existing battery energy storage system that we have at BPL. So right now, to explain that, we have 25 megawatts of batteries at BPL up on Blue Hills. You know what we do? We charge those batteries with diesel generators. How does that make any sense? Part of our RFP process of between 60 and 100 megawatts of solar power in Nassau will be utilized to charge those batteries. Therefore, taking offline the dirty diesel generation that we use now to do that. The request for proposals that was issued was for up to 5 20-megawatt solar plants to be constructed in Nassau on identified parcels of land, and the independent power producer will subsequently build that plant and sell power to BPL pursuant to a power purchase agreement. This is, like I said, the first large-scale industrial solar application in Nassau. The first. Some people talk, and some people do. We know which side of the fence we sit on. I applaud this fundamental reform to generate and provide solar energy to BPL. The RFP, as I said, was released. It's closed. We've had many respondents, and the review committee is currently working through the responses to the RFP. This will add solar generation capacity to our mix without any capital investment by BPL. Let me repeat that. We will add between 60 and 100 megawatts of new solar generation to BPL at a low cost without any capital investment by BPL. With respect to the Family Islands, as described earlier, there are significant challenges with BPL generation in the Family Islands, with much of the generation being rented at exorbitant costs and much of the rest of the generation end of its useful life. Remember that number I said? 80% of BPL's generation in the Family Island is at or near the end of its useful life. The government, again, has issued a Family Island request for proposal inviting independent power producers to provide new generation in the Family Islands, which will reduce the cost associated with serving the Family Islands and reduce the overall energy burden on consumers while increasing reliability. Many wouldn't know this, but I'll let you know. The actual cost to generate electricity throughout the Family Islands, my good friend across the way may know this. The cost of generation of electricity in the Family Islands is more than consumers pay. More than consumers pay. So for example, one island, it may cost 55 cents a kilowatt hour to generate, and you're only charging 38 cents. Right? Do you know who bears the burden of that loss? Nassau. Nassau, well, think about it. BPL has to operate on a cost recovery basis by Electricity Act. So if you're subsidizing the Family Islands, Nassau's consumers are subsidizing that Family Island. So if you can then revert that to a situation where the providing electricity in the Family Islands is done at a rate that is less, then that relieves the consumer in Nassau, because that subsidy is eliminated.
Yeah.
So not only through this Family Island RFP are we looking for microgrids to be set up to supply the power in the Family Islands, it must be supplied at a rate that makes sense when you look at the consumer's costs, because we want to bring down the cost of the consumer. It will also relieve the subsidy that the Nassau consumers are paying for power generation in the Family Islands. So it is a double and triple benefit to get the Family Islands straight. The overarching goal, you just wait. You just wait. More things coming, you know. More things coming. You just wait. Hold that. Hold that.
Honourable Member, address the chair, please.
The overarching goal is to get BPL out of the rental business and to partner with the private sector under a build, own, operate, and transfer model. You know what that means? At the end of the contract, you know who owns that plant? BPL own that. After the duration of the contract, it is a build, own, operate, transfer model to meet the energy demands with limited capital cost to BPL. We had a very, very strong response to our Family Island RFP, and we look forward to BPL partnering with viable independent power producers to ensure reliable and affordable electricity for our Family Islands. You know what this also includes? This includes a commitment of 30% minimum renewable energy as part of that microgrid mix. So if you win the RFP and say you get the right, I'll speak to my good friend, you get the right to set up a microgrid in Abaco, right? 30% of that capacity that you are providing has to be from renewable sources, solar sources. 30%. That was a condition in the RFP. You know what also was a condition in the RFP? You were given a scoring preference if you were 51% Bahamian owned or more. So none of the winning proposals were 100% foreign, or proposed winners, 100% foreign. Because you had a built-in scoring preference for Bahamian participation in this. Fantastic response. Fantastic response. Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer, this is real-time action, not a hypothetical dream. Some talk, and others do. For the Family Islands not included in the RFP process, because those who would have read the RFP would have seen the islands that were included. They're primarily the high-demand islands. The ones that were not included are primarily the smaller islands. The government has a parallel track for BPL, and we're exploring smaller size generation and generators for these islands that incorporate cutting-edge technology and provide cleaner and more affordable, reliable energy. We have done physical inspections of the plants that are providing these engines, or look to provide these engines. We're looking at a number of different types of technologies. We have preliminary support for the IDB to support this initiative for our smaller islands. And so this is a holistic approach to our Family Islands. in providing cleaner, more affordable, more reliable electricity as they develop. It is worth noting that most of the new Family Island generation projects will be fueled by LNG, ensuring that we are bringing cleaner energy all across our country. All across our country. The third component of our plan, there's only 4, so I'll be done shortly, but the third component of our strategy, again, is a conversion to LNG generation here in Nassau. Again, it was in our blueprint for change. Nobody should be surprised, and we are debating this today for that purpose. The government plans and is in active negotiations, as the bill would indicate, for the implementation of LNG as a fuel source for generation in New Providence. Converting to LNG generation is an effort to reduce the overall cost of energy to the consumer, to improve the efficiency of the generation asset, the actual generator, and to reduce the environmental impacts in our country. LNG is being brought to the Bahamas as an alternative to heavy fuel oil and as an alternative to the use of diesel in our generation. It is anticipated that BPL will, over time, convert their generation assets that are capable of conversion and that still have adequate useful life to LNG generation. Now let me stick a pin there. Let me stick a pin there. So colleagues would remember that the prior administration decided to buy, I think it was 7 new plants? 7 new Wärtsilä engines. 7 new Wärtsilä engines. 7, and each one of them less than 20 megawatts, right? 7 new Wärtsilä engines. And at the time, the minister, BPL, advertised these to be tri-fuel engines, right? Tri-fuel engines. What does that mean? That means that they could burn on heavy fuel oil, which is what they're being burned on now, diesel, or LNG, tri-fuel engines, all over the place. In the papers, BPL press statements, the minister, all big and bold, said he was bringing in these new engines, 7 new Wärtsilä engines, tri-fuel, right? Tri-fuel. So when we came and we're looking at our strategy, we went and we said, okay, we got tri-fuel engines. We can immediately, well, now you can't run more than 4 of them engines at a time because the building they put them in is falling apart. So you really got 7 engines, but you really only got 4 engines for the price of 7. Figure that one out, right? Figure that one out. So you have 4 engines for the price of 7, but these are supposed to be tri-fuel engines, so any LNG strategy, they're supposed to fit right in, right? Fit right in. Now, well, that's the building. They vibrate, and the building is falling to pieces, right? Come to find out, BPL sends their team out there, looking at them. These are perfect engines. I said BPL is going to convert to LNG, right? So let's get a plan on the they should be able to just plug and play. Maybe clean them out and plug and play. Come to find out, they're not tri-fuel engines. They lied to us. It's not tri-fuel engines. They are dual-fuel engines. They burn diesel and heavy fuel oil and require an infrastructure conversion, a new kit, to be installed for them to burn LNG. They're not tri-fuel ready. It's possible. You know what that possibility costs? $30 to $50 million to convert these engines to LNG capable engines after they spent $100 million to acquire these. And when they made the order for tri-fuel, and they changed the order to dual fuel, costing the Bahamian people $30 to $50 million on engines that they can't even run 7 at the same time.
Yes. The chair recognizes Senator the Honourable Darren Henfield.
The member is misleading and he's speaking with forked tongues. The member indicated here that BPL and the minister said fuels were tri-fuel.
You're standing for what purpose?
I thought you knew
Member?
I stood on a point of order.
Okay, thank you very
Still
much.
say that now?
You have to say it.
Yes, honorable member.
That's the rules. You want me to
Don't
read
forget, you sit here with me, you know. You know how we operate here, right? So the member's misleading. And then the member came right back and said that a kit, which would cost a lot of money, could be used to convert these generators into tri-fuel. So to say that they're not tri-fuel capable is wrong. Is wrong. No, you said worse than that. You use unparliamentary language to say they lied.
They did lie.
You use unparliamentary language to say they lied. And so the member is misleading this place unnecessarily so. He's almost finished, so I thought I would sit and leave him alone, but when you can say stuff like that, you gotta stop that, man. That's wrong.
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable member,
I said that they was advertised that they were tri-fuel engines, not that they were incapable of being converted. I clearly said they're capable of being converted. They were advertised to the Bahamian people to be able to burn LNG at the time they were put in the plant in Nassau, and they lied.
This member continues to use unparliamentary language.
I didn't call you a liar.
It is unbecoming of a senior member of this senior house.
I got something else to say.
To use such language in this place. If you're gonna allow him to do that, you know,
Then let them go.
we can take off the gloves, right?
Gloves are off, my friend.
Thank you very much. Honorable member, please adhere to parliamentary language.
Not necessary.
The government is also, Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer,
Yes.
adding much needed LNG generation capacity with independent power producers. The economic modeling does not support the rental of generation, as it is very costly, and the ability to pass through these costs is limited. Continuing to rent for increased generation requirements is not an option for BPL. Now, the honour member was correct when he observed under his breath that you need the infrastructure upgrade as well to handle these types. Yeah, you know that. Absolutely, you know that. You didn't upgrade. And when the member speaks about the infrastructure, he means the transmission and distribution infrastructure. So the high voltage lines that carry the energy long distance, and the distribution lines that branch out into the respective communities. That's what a transmission and distribution system is. And he's absolutely correct. He's absolutely correct. He's a wise man. In order to support the generation upgrades that we discussed today, for New Providence, and frankly, the Family Islands, including the increased generation capacity as well as integrating solar energy, which requires a whole different type of interconnectivity into your grid, solar, utility-sized solar, we require a fundamental upgrade to our transmission and distribution assets. Again, those are the high voltage lines that take the energy long distance, or electricity, and the distribution lines that come into your homes. Our current transmission and distribution infrastructure is old, it's outdated, it cannot transmit the volume of electricity necessary today, and frankly is on the verge of complete collapse. That's the truth. I'll give you an example. Listen to this. When I say that our current infrastructure cannot transmit the electricity today, it is so inferior or so under capacity that we are losing about 20 megawatts of power through leakage through the line, because if you think about it, if you have that much power and your line is that big and you squeeze it through, it dissipates away in order to get down the transmission line. That's what we're talking about. That's the reality. So we are losing 20 megawatts of power because of our antiquated transmission and distribution infrastructure. You know who bears the cost of that? The cost of the fuel, the cost of the related updates and maintenance and all that. You know who pays that cost? Bahamian consumer. The Bahamian consumer. Same thing with water. Bahamian consumer. We're talking about electricity today. So the necessity of upgrading our transmission distribution, you would hear it called as T&D, is not only because it's on the verge of collapse and old, but also we're losing efficiencies in electricity that is generated, which is costing the Bahamian consumer. This is likewise an urgent upgrade required for BPL. Listen to this. Some of the transformers and substations date back to around independence. Independence. We are still using elements of our transmission and distribution system after almost 50 years. And imagine the energy demand growth that the Nassau has incurred over the last 50 years. Do you think that stuff is adequate?
Of course not.
BPL themselves estimate that an upgrade to the transmission and distribution infrastructure can save as much as $10 to $30 million. $1 million off the bat. Instant savings. Instant savings. BPL also estimates it requires a minimum of $100 million of capital expenditure to undertake the necessary upgrades to the transmission and distribution infrastructure. $100 million. Now you're up to $400+ million, right? Minimum. 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 This is money that BPL, unless you tell me otherwise, my friend, nor the government has at its disposal to invest. So just for bare replacement capital cost for the infrastructure, replacement, not new generation, replacement, $400 million. Plus, if you're going to add to the generation needs, remember we're $64 million megawatts under capacity. As another 64, you might as well say $1 million a megawatt, that's another $64 million. We are working on a transmission and distribution upgrade plan that incorporates improving our transmission lines with a larger high-capacity lines installed in a loop. So right now, the transmission system should be in a loop, interconnected, so if you fail on one, you can send power back. We're not. Our transmission lines have a gap. So if you cut in the middle, you're done. Everybody downstream is done. We want to put a transmission line in a loop, right? We also want to do necessary upgrades to our switch stations and our substations. And these upgrades are one to increase capacity and reliability, but also to make them more storm hardening. If you would see what our substations look like compared to what a modern substation in any kind of modern infrastructure looks like, it's night and day.
What?
It's night and day. It's like having one of them, remember them little flip phones?
Yeah.
And then having an iPhone 15, right? That's what this is like, our substations, right? By doing this, we'll rebalance the load, and we're going to reduce voltage fluctuation. So you know when you get home after work, say 5:30, 6 o'clock, and your power dips. Well, you know why it dips? Because everybody turned the air conditioner on at the same time, right? When everybody turns the air conditioner on at the same time, the voltage dips because the lines can't carry the voltage necessary to seamlessly power up that load. If you upgrade your transmission distribution system with the necessary switch stations and interconnection upgrades and substations, the voltage coming through will be enough to power when you have those instant load upgrades, right? So when everybody turns their air conditioning on, you won't get that dip. You won't get that reduced voltage that affects your high-performance electronic equipment in your house, right? Surge and a dip. I'm concluding right now. The transmission line looping and substations interconnecting multiple upgrade substations significantly enhances the reliability of electricity to the consumer. This configuration allows for alternative power distribution routes if one line or substation fails. You always hear, oh, we had a trip, right? We had a trip.
yeah.
And then the power goes out, right? BPL says, oh, we had a trip at Clifton, or we had a trip at Blue Hills. Well, that's a substation tripping offline. And because they're not interconnected, one trips and a whole section of the island goes out of power. We're familiar with that. I'm sure the people listening to me are familiar with that. This upgrade is to prevent that from happening because trips happen. Even in new equipment, trips happen. If you do a looped system with substation upgrades in between and you have a trip, your reliability will not be affected. That's the theory. And so that's what we're doing with our T&D upgrades. So in conclusion, Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer, BPL in its current state, the state that we found when we came to office, requires more than $500 million in basic infrastructure upgrades. That's not even, I haven't even discussed the $500 million in debt that BPL is holding. So when the Minister of Energy says you need $1 billion to bail out BPL, you need $1 billion. $500 million on capital expenditure, $500 million on debt. BPL nor the government have the money to invest, nor are we able to borrow the money to invest. A new paradigm of energy generation, transmission, distribution, and supply is required in the country to move us forward to cleaner, more reliable, and more affordable energy. The approach requires a fundamental change. This is an opportunity for everybody involved, including the employees of BPL. An opportunity for greater skills enhancement. An opportunity for upward mobility in a new area or developing area, an exciting area, and an opportunity for professional growth for all of those involved. We are excited about the way forward and everyone's involvement as we move forward, upward, onward, together in energy generation and supply. By passing today the Electricity Bill 2024 and the Natural Gas Bill 2024, we set the legal framework for these reforms, for the march onward to more reliable and cost-effective energy for all Bahamians. We do this for everybody. Because if you would listen, the IMF spoke to us like they speak to governments every year. They come and speak to you. And you know what the IMF told us? You guys are doing a great job managing the finances of the country. You know, monetary policy is great. My friend will tell you that. Right? Everything is doing well. You're paying down. Your deficits are shrinking. But the single most important impediment to growth in the Bahamas, the single most, is energy. Of all the things that they looked at in the country, every piece of the economy that they looked at the country, the number one thing inhibiting the growth of the country is energy. And this is what we're doing today. This is what we're doing. I've laid out the strategy. I've laid out specific plans that are currently underway on how we see us making these fundamental reforms. How we see us. So I want to be clear, Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer. A vote against these bills is a vote against reliable and cost-effective electricity for the constituents that every one of them want to represent in the next election. So I am watching very carefully, Mr. Presiding Officer, very, very carefully to see what their response is on the opposite side to our reform initiatives to bring cost-effective, reliable, cleaner energy to all the consumers throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, including those in Abaco,
I want this relief now.
including those in Pinewood,
I want that relief now.
including
Seabreeze.
those in Seabreeze, and including those in Carmichael. That's what I hear. Carmichael. Mr. Honorable Presiding Officer, I so move for the second reading of the Electricity Bill 2024 and the Natural Gas Bill 2024.
Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Honourable Member, thank you very much for your comprehensive overview of the electricity bill and the natural gas bill and your analysis of the situation in the Bahamas. Is there a seconder? Jim. The chair recognizes Senator the Honourable James Roel Turner.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning, Mr. Vice President or Mr. Presiding Officer, as our esteemed Attorney General has referred to you this morning. You know, versatility is a good thing, because the truth be told, you wear both of those titles very well.
Thank
So
you.
if I take the liberty to interchange them, don't hold it against me. And again, good morning to the fellow senators here. It's always a pleasure to see you. I rise this morning to second the Electricity and the Natural Gas Bill 2024. But normally before I get going, I give you a little snapshot of in terms of what's happening with deaths and marriages and the like in Grand Bahama. And I always like to have a wedding because I don't have to talk so much about funerals. I am standing this morning. Last time I spoke with a friend's son that was about to get married, but this morning I congratulate my beloved friend, Mr. Kingsley Smith, the Member of Parliament for Western and Bimini, who just last Saturday was joined in holy matrimony. I wish him and his new bride all the best on this new journey, and I'm certain that they will do well. Again, speaking of a wedding, sure beats speaking of a funeral any day. Now, just the words of electricity bill evokes some of the most mixed feelings in many of us that we've become quite familiar with. In fact, I got to tell you something. When I was thinking about this, there were many polite ways to describe some of this. But I look forward to the day when we get more bills and we can look at it and say, well, mother sick. Boy, that's a low electricity bill, eh? And boy, and let me tell you, I look forward to that in our lifetime. And I can tell you, it is achievable. When I lived, let me tell you, when I lived in Florida, I started to wonder, you know, I lived there with my wife and two daughters, and I wondered, where was the thermostat in the house, right? They hardly turned off the air conditioning. Never bothered me. When I returned back home, after the first month, I moved the thermostat to the master bedroom. Because I knew, because I knew what the threat of allowing youngsters to bother what that thermostat meant. But it is only an element of what the stress and strain is when we talk about energy in the Bahamas. In every great journey, there's always a starting point, and there's certainly a turning point. The Electricity Bill 2024 sets out clearly certain objectives of the bill, and they are namely A, to create an electricity supply which recognizes that safe, least cost, reliable, and environmentally sustainable electricity is vital to the economic and social welfare of the Bahamas. And B, to secure the long-term energy security of the Bahamas through the establishment of a legal and regulatory framework that ensures the provision of safe, least cost, reliable, and environmentally sustainable supply of electricity. And it concludes with a C, to establish an electricity sector policy for supply of electricity throughout the Bahamas, consistent and in accordance with the goals of the national energy policy. Whenever our country talks about policies, I get excited. Because when you speak about a policy, you start to talk about a principle. And when you start to talk about a principle, you talk about a guidance. And when you start guiding on principle, you always move in the right direction. And you know, Mr. Vice President, the bill goes on to address many other relevant matters, such as land acquisition, the role of ERCA and its functions, borrowing by BPL, the role of renewable energy as a part of the plan, license rights, and so on. We live in a society today where so many persons spend time talking about what should have happened, what could have happened, what would have happened if. And that's usually entertaining, huh? It has a certain value. But I've spent a lot of time on Grand Bahama, and I have learned the value of the past. I know the essence of the present, and I know that if we want a bright future, it requires specific attention, courage, and skills to get us where we want to be. We must henceforth move forward with the end goals in mind. It wasn't so long ago, you know, I remember a leader in our country that spent a lot of time consulting, sharing, talking with others, and he was often criticized for that. But what's just as strange today is many of those who criticized him then are now calling for the same consultations. Well, the problem is that the high cost of power and its dependability is not a new one in our country. But what is new is this desire to tackle it head on. And this is admirable. It's good, and it's what's needed. It's a refreshing thing, I may add. Mr. Presiding Officer, we are ready to move. We are ready to move. As a Grand Bahamian, I am no longer interested in wait, review, and then see. And then wait, review, and then see some more. And then see again. While this cost of high electricity costs strangle businesses and households. Yes, for far too long, the cost associated with power consumption has been affecting businesses negatively and causing a lot of stress in many households. Can you imagine that in some cases, the power bill and the mortgage is the same amount? That's some crazy stuff. My. You know, what a burden. The truth be told, when we address the cost of power, we will be making a giant step in the right direction of reducing the cost of living to everyone in our country. It has nothing to do with politics. More affordable, more reliable, coupled with a good plan of action is what is being presented and what, as a consumer, I am prepared to support. I have neighbors on both sides of the divide, all declaring that enough is enough of the high power bills and the faulty power services. I know of families whose choice was food or pay the power bill, and these were real choices. I don't like to talk too much about hurricanes because I live with the memory of having lost good friends in the past Hurricane Dorian, and I know sometimes that folks get tired of hearing about the trauma associated with these hurricanes. But even with our power bills on Grand Bahama, as a consumer today, we are reminded of the storms and its effects. Let me share something with you, share a short story with you. A single mother with 2 kids living in a house about 2,500 square feet. The normal power bill is about $300. In 1 month, she received a bill for $1,490. This is crazy, right? So she calls up, and folks call you up and say, I need some help. I didn't believe it. So I said, bring it, let me take a look at it. I couldn't understand it. Surely there must be something I could call, somebody I could call. A figure must be out of place. Here's the part that I want you to know today, though. On that bill of $1,490 and some change, an amount of $501.86 is for storm recovery and fuel surcharges. Storm recovery and fuel surcharges alone, $501.
Storm recovery?
Yeah, storm recovery. I looked at it and I took out my calculator and I say, basically electricity that month was $48 a day. At $48 a day, you might as well plug in your generator and go buy gas from the station. This is crazy, and this is stuff that we must fix. We know that something has to change because enough is enough. Sometimes I wonder on Grand Bahama if Grand Bahama Power can charge you separately for the fuel they use to provide power to your home. Why can't cab drivers charge you separately for the fuel they burn when they're taking you to your fare? It's crazy, right? But we got to stop the crazy stuff in this country. When we know things ought to be fixed, we have to be committed to fixing it. People need relief, and unless action is taken now, many can expect inherited prolonged inefficiency and strain, and nobody should be looking forward to that. We need relief, Mr. Presiding Officer. The time is now, and we must encourage our regulators to regulate and demonstrate consumer protection practices. I agree that it is time to move to a 21st century solution to our power challenges. We know that our power consumption demands will only get greater, and we must prepare for it. We know it's coming. There's no excuse not to be prepared. As such, Mr. Vice President, this morning I stand to second and support the Electricity Bill 2024 and the Natural Gas Bill 2024. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member, for your contribution. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to modernize and consolidate the law relating to the supply of electricity and to repeal the Electricity Act, Chapter 194, and for connected matters. A bill for an act to regulate as many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michaela Barnett Ellis.
Thank you, Senator Pickstock. As always, it is a pleasure to contribute in this honorable upper chamber. Our beautiful Bahama land is on the brink of transformation. When we look around our country, whether it's the athletics track or at this Senate table, it is apparent that the next generation has stepped up to the plate. We are standing on the broad shoulders of the women and men who have gone before us. Nation building is a relay event, and as we saw this weekend at the track, it requires teamwork and discipline and a little bit of luck. I want to start off by congratulating the IAAF and the local organizing committee for putting on a phenomenal meet. But being pretty and exciting is not enough. In these economic and very taxing times, we must also ensure that we receive a financial benefit from hosting games like the IAAF World Relays, because taxpayers cannot bear more expenses without profits. Senator Pickstock, the cost of living in the Bahamas is simply too high. Too many persons struggle to make ends meet. And this is not a convenient opposition observation. In the speech from the throne 2023, Her Excellency said that it was the government's intention to introduce measures to combat the high and rising cost of living. Her Excellency noted that the Bahamas remains one of the top 10 most expensive countries in the world, and that the high cost of living is a major cause of financial stress and psychological distress in our country. And without a doubt, the cost of electricity is a significant driver of high costs in this country. Senator Pickstock, the previous administration had a solution to the high costs of electricity. Mr. Chairman? But this New Day, full of pain administration, in their arrogance, dismissed the existing plans that brought the cost of electricity down and made it manageable. In September 2021, that was the month of the election, the fuel surcharge was 0.105. Now, the fuel surcharge is a whopping 0.1939. The cost of electricity is felt across all sectors, whether you consume a little bit of electricity or a lot. The Bahamian electorate was promised relief. They were promised a nuts and bolts analysis of the cost of electricity and the operation of BPL. But it is very hard to have confidence in this PLP administration when they have struggled to give us a straight answer to legitimate questions. Like Simon Peter outside the temple, they denied that they discontinued the hedge multiple times. And then when the documentation came out, it was a pointing fingers exercise. They tried to restore confidence by playing cabinet musical chairs, but that did not help, because the minister now responsible for energy secured unlawful loans in her previous capacity. And we know that following the law is something that this administration seems to struggle with. It doesn't matter whether you are the Prime Minister of Abaco or the Prime Minister of Elizabeth. The Minister of Finance is the sole borrowing agent for the government of the Bahamas, and that's in the Public Debt Management Act. The Public Procurement Act continues to have provisions such as the provision to advertise, which are still being ignored. The award of contracts isn't being published within 60 days, and the names of beneficial owners of those companies certainly aren't being published within 60 days. The Electricity Act 2017 states that BPL, being a public electricity provider, should submit to ERCA a renewable energy plan every 3 years, and that ERCA must publish the summary of this renewable energy plan and determine whether they approve the plan or not. Interestingly, this requirement is also repeated in the draft legislation before us. But since this is the New Day, Don't Follow No Laws administration, there has not been a publication of a renewed energy plan since they came to office, and it is overdue, as the last one was published in 2020. Am I surprised that the Electricity Act has been added to the list of legislation not followed by this administration? Not at all, because leopards don't change their spots. The state of BPL's finances are a mystery wrapped in an enigma and dipped in a paradox. There's a $110 million loan to BPL, and the government is using its best Mission Impossible moves to avoid providing an explanation. We do not know the interest charge or the repayment terms. We don't know whether the loan was applied to the $150 million legacy debt for fuel. We thought we knew, but now we're not quite sure what our fuel charge is being applied to. And most importantly, we do not know what plans are being made for BPL to repay the $255 million that it owes the central government. It owes this money to the Bahamian people. And no doubt, my colleagues on the other side of the table are going to paint this legislation as innovative and an example of the Prime Minister's commitment to transforming the Bahamas. And they're going to ignore the fact that 80% of this bill is the same as the existing Electricity Act. In fact, the existing bill allows a person to apply to be off the grid and use solar energy, and that identical provision is also contained in this bill. They continue to oversell to the media while under-delivering and then complaining that right-thinking members of the media see through the smoke and mirrors facade. The provision of utilities is essential to our developing nation. For the financial well-being of those that live and do business in the Bahamas, affordable electricity is non-negotiable. As a nation that is extremely susceptible to the adverse impacts of climate change, sustainable energy development is crucial. This administration has left a King Kong-sized carbon footprint while traveling the globe to preach about the adverse impacts of climate change on small nations. But at home, there is talk, but very little action to indicate that this administration is truly trying to meet our national energy goal plans. Our national energy plan goals, sorry. We can't get a straight answer on what's going on. And we saw yesterday the government's unwillingness to answer questions by the opposition, legitimate questions. We want to know the particulars of the IDB loan. We, the people, we have to pay that back. Our children will have to pay that loan back. We want to know the particulars of the deal to outsource BPL's generation, transmission, and distribution. Was this contract put out to bid? Who were the bidders? What were their bids? Did Team New Day pick the best deal for the Bahamian people, or did they pick the best deal for themselves? The speed in which these bills have been tabled, debated, and sent up to this honorable chambers tells us all that there's something afoot. And unfortunately, Team New Day does not believe in transparency, and we won't know what's going on until someone spills the beans or the deal is already done. This is not modern governments. We deserve better. The blueprint promised transparency and governance and good governance, but the PLP continues to fall short, and secret deals are the order of the day. It has been 2 years and 8 months. We passed the halfway mark months ago, but the energy sector, much like the rest of the Bahamas, has little to show for this administration other than those 50th Independence gold pins. Our cost of living, our financial well-being, and our happiness index are all tied to the provision and cost of electricity in this country. There's something afoot at BPL, and the government is trying to keep it under wraps. And I cannot support bills that have been presented to us in a vacuum. As I take my seat, Mother's Day is on Sunday, and I would like to wish the mothers of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas a happy Mother's Day. Mothers come in many shapes and forms. Their impact on those who they love, and those that love them is profound. There is often no thank yous or appreciation for the things that mothers do on a daily basis to make the lives of those around them better. And now, more than ever, the weight of motherhood is heavy. We are trying to raise our children in a world which sometimes has too much technology, while we manage our careers, spouses, parents, and our own hopes and dreams. Thankfully, fathers are sharing the load of parenthood, but it is still not an equal sharing. I am grateful for my one good mummy, because without a shadow of a doubt, she has made me the woman that I am today. And it's also her birthday on Tuesday. She turns 21 again. So, to the mothers, mother figures, aunties around our archipelago, thank you. I see you, and this nation stands on your shoulders. And with that, I take my seat. And may God continue to bless this beautiful country.
Thank you for your contribution, Senator Ellis. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Ronald Duncombe.
Mr. Chair, good day. Today I wish to start my contribution on the same tone as our chaplain today who spoke about showing kindness with sincerity without a hidden agenda. And and then I hear my senator colleague talking about transparency, and I just gotta wonder. So I gotta take a lead. I want to be transparent today because I believe that we are all naturalists, we're all Bahamians. I certainly too want to wish my mother happy Mother's Day to come, who's still here, who's been a father figure in my life, my wife, Tanya, and all the mothers in the Bahamas, and obviously at home in the community where I live in Kalani, who's worked with me along with my senator colleagues. So with that being in mind, I just want the world to see, and the Bahamas to see, that I will take my senator colleagues' advice, and I wish to publicly give my senator colleague a happy Mother's Day gift, showing her that. No, this is for my Kalani community mothers. All right? Yeah. Show her that I am bigger. I am bigger, you know, than some people. Mr. Chairman. So the first, on the records to reflect, on this day, 9th of May, the first Mother's Day gesture has been given to my Senate colleague in Kalani. Live. For everyone to see that we are above politics in this house, all right? Here. Here, Senator. There you go. She caused it. I was going to give it to her off camera, but she said we can't do things in the shadow, and they got to see that we are bigger than politics. You know, I got a little bit of education in food and beverage, so I want to advise you that it's going to taste so much better on June 1st to June 2nd. It's going to taste very, very good. So if you want to share in a glass with me, please give me a call. We'll share a drink on that one. All right? Yeah, but now for the people of business. I had a great pleasure of being next to Ryan Pindar, AG, who kind of surgically gave a synopsis on this bill. And I'm always great to go behind him and learn so much about these bills. So my takeaway was pretty simple in regards to showing my support with National Energy's reform, which is a transformative piece of legislation that paves the way forward for a better Bahamas. The Electricity Bill 2024 seeks to modernize and consolidate the law relating to the supply of electricity within the Bahamas. It aims to repeal and replace the current Electricity Act 2025 and the Electricity Rate Reduction Bond Act 2019 by regulating all aspects of renewable energy, establishing energy efficiency programs, and providing for dispute resolution and AI regulation. This bill holds a promise of a more equitable and sustainable energy for our nation. So, Mr. Deputy, my takeaway when our AG spoke such in depth about this bill clearly is the government's objectives. And, it's one that speaks to establishing the legislative framework to regulate the importation, the shipping, the transportation, and regasification and retailing of natural gas, also to ensure these activities are performed in a safe environmental manner, efficiently and economically effective, to provide higher fuel efficiency to lower costs for consumers, to promote the global effort in reducing emission that contributes to the global climate change, thus serving to sustain the environment for future generations. So as I've watched our Prime Minister and at other place, just simply said, these bills today are essential to supporting progress on all fronts. So in our government's blueprint for change, the government did pledge to use both solar and LNG to make electricity more affordable, more reliable, and more cleaner. So today, I'm proud to say that our government is delivering on its first comprehensive reform, and this reform will certainly bring savings to all Bahamians. So, Mr. Deputy, for far too long, we as Bahamians and in the business sector have shouldered the heavy burden of exorbitant electricity costs. the struggle to manage these expenses in businesses is very, very taxing, and at times has caused us as business operators to have to reduce employment or even shut down our businesses. And we recognize that small businesses are certainly the lifeline of our economy. So we understood that global inflation, that crisis has compounded challenges faced by Bahamians, despite the efforts of the government, trying to alleviate financial strain to Bahamians. And while our government has implemented policies, and also raised minimum wage, reducing VAT, has also slashed custom duties, this relentless march of inflation has certainly undermined the impact of these initiatives, leaving many of our people grappling with financial insecurities. So yet, in the face of adversity, Mr. Deputy, the government remains steadfast. It remains steadfast in its commitment in effecting meaningful change. Our government recognizes that this bill will bring true relief to the high cost of living that hinges upon the root of cause that electricity needs to be lowered. Prime Minister Davis certainly has a compassionate heart, and it's definitely obvious by this bill. He cares. We can see by this bill it is imperative that we modernize our energy infrastructure. We need to meet the demands of a 21st century. This is the relief that all of us as Bahamian has been waiting for. We need this relief now. The government's vision for a new energy future for our country encompasses on a widespread adoption of solar power, the integration of LNG as a complementary fuel source, to establish the establishment of a resilient power grid capable of withstanding the challenges posed by natural disasters. Simply put, the government's vision for new energy for the Bahamas' future is very bold and transformative. Action steps, Mr. Deputy, has already begun from December last, especially in the Family Islands. The government has received robust responses to the call of RFP proposals for solar and LNG generation. However, progress must be accompanied by the necessary legislative framework to support the government's endeavors. And we've heard the Attorney General speak in depth about those legislative framework. Through the introduction of this Electricity Bill 2024, the government is not merely enacting superficial reforms, but laying the groundwork for sustainable change. This comprehensive legislation seeks to repeal outdated laws, empower ERCA to regulate renewable energy, and to promote energy efficiency practices. Furthermore, the bill establishes mechanisms for resolving disputes and managing natural disaster relief costs, ensuring transparency and accountability within the energy sector. It also pioneers regulations pertaining to artificial intelligence and machine learning, demonstrating the government's commitment to leveraging technological advancements for the benefits of all Bahamians. So, Mr. Chairman, as we embark on this transformative journey, let us remain focused in our dedication to serving the best interest of the Bahamian people. Let us all seize this moment to shape a future where energy is affordable, sustainable, and accessible to all. Together, let us build a brighter tomorrow for generations to come. I give my full support to this bill. I clearly recognize the bill's value and the potential to alleviate high cost electricity. And these electricity bills that are direly faced by all Bahamians. Let us enact this legislation with the understanding that it holds the opportunity for a brighter future in our country. So before I take my seat, Mr. Chairman, I would just like to thank the executive chairman for the Kalani branch meeting that we had on the 29th of April for a job well done. Our guest speaker was none other than Loretta Butler Turner from the SBDC, who spoke about its function, who spoke about the importance of small business development and their support. And I must say that she was dynamic. Her in-depth analysis on the operation of that division was truly received by all participants there that evening. And I just want to say publicly, Loretta Butler Turner, thank you so much. We enjoyed you being there that evening and look forward to seeing you again with more information at our branch meeting. And again, to all the mothers of the Bahamas, happy Mother's Day. To my mothers and my community, I look forward to seeing you door to door as I come around this evening and tomorrow and on the weekend. So happy Mother's Day to you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I take my seat.
Thank you very much, Senator Ronald Duncombe, for your contribution. As many? The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Reuben Ramming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a pleasant good day to everyone. And in my absence on this coming Sunday in your lives, I want to commend your mothers for some good fruits. And I would like to remind all of y'all, and the some that do sometimes, stop making your ma ashamed. All right? Because you know the quality of your mom by the fruit. And that's why I don't carry on like some of y'all either. But by and large, I hope that as I thought it was such a divine privilege I got to read Pinder's father and the majority of your all fathers, that maybe you could recommend to the president that even though we meet after Mother's Day, that we could do something where we can have a photo shoot. And I want equal rights. Let's clear at least the section where the throne is, just to get, we know the place is being renovated. Or find a suitable place in here where we can take those photos of our moms. I think that would be very, very powerful. We did it for the fathers in that regard. So I truly and sincerely thank God for all of your mothers, and for their contributions that they make to this country by their seed. I want to acknowledge my mom, Evangeline Betsy Butler Ramming, a very strong, beautiful woman to whom I think I got most of my traits. And my mother-in-law, normally people crack jokes with mother-in-laws, but mine is not a joke to be cracked. Mine is one who I rightly dropped the law and just simply call her mom. She likes me, and I don't feel that it is because you marry a daughter. I think I transcend that. She likes me. Yeah, I'm sure of that, and she showed that tender care, and I appreciate it. I'm very appreciative of that. Been there through those kind words that come at the right time. And then we have other mothers that I won't preface it with no titles, just mom, like my Aunt Trish, sounding board. You know, it's good to have people you could just say the unvarnished truth about, not worry about parliamentary language. Because there are some times in your life you go through things and parliamentary language don't convey the truth. You know, and you could never have that benefit around the top layer of moms. You need another kind of mom, you know, who you could tussle with, and then when you come down low, then the problem is fixed. And Reverend Laura Glinton, who is still home recovering. She's in a major battle with her health. And she's not only a mother to me, she's a mother to a lot of children. And when I say a lot of children, I'm not just talking about her biological children, because of the kind of person who she is. If you were to go in a crowd and say, Laura children stand, you probably see about 200 or 300 people standing in the crowd. And I'm very, very grateful for them. And to all of the ladies here today, again, I want to say happy Mother's Day. And Senator Ronnie will provide you all with our gift. with our gift. With that, I thank you, Senator Duncan. You know, I sigh when I even look at and think about BEC and BPL. And as much as you sigh and suck your teeth, it's like a thorn in the flesh. As much as you suck your teeth, you got to do something about it. Well, really, I could say I have given 80% of the exact speech that the AG have given, and I'm sure people before me have given 80% of the exact speech that I've given, that the AG have given everybody else. Everybody goes on with BPL. And it all sounds like a heroic thing, and sometimes I just smile because G.I. Joe, the cartoon hero, has a saying that knowing is half the battle. So really, quite frankly, half the battle of fixing BPL is already solved. Because the reality is, we all know about the issues with distribution and everything else, and we all know, despite the political time or season when decisions was made, that you can track the record and see when BPL was buffeted or entered into a storm and a transition. Those are reality. I could say them, and I probably will say them, but the fact still is, I could tell you plenty times about how the Saxon win in 1996, you know, and I could say how they win back to back,
2 straight,
and everything else. I could even go and say who win last year in Junkanoo. Junkanoo season is 6 months away. So even the celebrations and the criticism has its place when it comes down to solutions. They are just simply lessons to learn from. I have witnessed Israeli doctors tending to Palestinians, and I've witnessed Palestinian doctors tending to Israelis. Sometimes in life we must simply get the deed done. The history of BPL is an amazing thing. It truly is a saga, somewhat of a tragedy, a romantic novel, an action movie, but I'm looking for a fairy tale ending. I remember when there was a time when BPL was in the black. And it was marked historically and factually. I think it's around the chairmanship of the late Bradley Roberts. That BPL record shows that it finally moved into the red. I believe some things supposed to be above politics, man. And when the tariff rates was adjusted for what it appeared to be, you know, a political thing, you know, we lowering it so you could feel you're doing something, it set into a spiral. Then that spiral was hard to recover from. And it necessitated the Perry administration, Perry Christie administration, to find a way under the debt burden of BEC to remove the debt and cause the corporation to at least have some semblance of functionality. The same thing at around about the same time was when Bank of the Bahamas was going through its mess and its ordeal because of all the bad loans, which caused them to create a entity called Resolve, in which they could move the negative loans off the books so that Bank of Bahamas can now function. And in the case of Bank of Bahamas, I think all could say, at least as it relates to saving the banks and its reputation, it is doing much better, if not some would say well. But the books, off the books, you'll find that in Resolve, those tens of millions, I think it might have been, am I correct, 200 plus billion? It was a good amount, 100 million, had to be removed to save Bank of the Bahamas because they couldn't carry that debt and look good on paper and in reality function. I think I remember when the 17 million or so dollars was separated for the payment of judgments and against the government. One of the questions that I asked very, very sincerely is that I hope that some of those same persons whom we know who have some of the legacy debt in Resolve, and basing on public knowledge of the judgment against one or two of them, some of them could have get some good chunk of change that they won in court, around about 10. And I publicly asked the Minister of State for Finance, say, you got to make sure that money go back, send him the receipt, and send him where it goes back to pay his debt that's in Resolve. And BTC went through the same situation, and the government, in its wisdom at the time, the Perry Christie administration, decided to create an entity called Resolve, which is the first advent of the splitting of the BEC, so that the legacy debt could remain and the entity itself could still function without that debt burden. Now, I think that BPL itself has run to the point where it has its own debt, BPL, and BEC still carries that legacy debt. So when you talk about that legacy debt, that's an albatross that's hanging around all of our necks. The acknowledgement of the AG of what has been acknowledged repeatedly, like I said, most of the stuff that was presented is a snapshot for the Bahamian people that has been given over and over and over again. And we need to understand the importance of these things, because it may not ease the pain, but the why sort of brings a little bit of understanding. That we in New Providence, because of the population size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, does carry the weight of those persons in the Family Islands. Yep. And there's a side of me that say, man, you know, every man should carry their own load, and you need to ask people if you really want to carry that, but then we call them Family Islands for a reason. Because apart from us shouldering the load, a significant portion of the load, to keep their electricity within a comfortable range, we also need to appreciate how the simple can of cream that we suck our teeth about here in Nassau, see what it costs in Anagua. Or go as near as Andros and see what it costs in Andros. So despite our feeling that every man should carry, every tub should sit on his own bottom, we still appreciate and understand whatever we can do to help our brothers in the Family Islands who suffer from all these other things, the cost of fuel and everything else that we take for granted, well, suffer that to be so. Then we introduced options for BPL over the years. Again, one was including the Power Secure and bringing in a management team that can do what we hoped they could have done, but they obviously didn't. They end up generating significant revenues from themselves, and I don't think we get to see any of the real benefit from them, except the fact that at the end of the day, their leader, Pamela Hill, was blessed enough to make $1,741 a day, which I would have spoken before compared to the criticism of those who, one of the individual who managed the food program, what they got in a week, she's making in a day. Then under the previous administration, we saw reversion back to Bahamianization of BPL. And we had a very innovative group of persons, group of Bahamians, who many of the things should have made us all proud. Because now we're stuck with legacy debt that still is owed through BPL but held by BEC, and suffering all of the vicissitudes of bad political and international decisions, unnecessary wars, and poor decisions that impact us and rock us like financial hurricanes that we have no control over. And yet we saw the innovation of those board. Donovan was the leader? Who was the leader of the board? BPL. Moxie. Yes, Mr. Moxie and those. We saw creative decisions. These decisions was made in the light of the fact that the Bahamas as a whole is in what we call junk status. And so under these men, they found a very creative way to save the Bahamian people and develop a mechanism in which we could generate electricity at a more affordable rate and give us a break. So Mr. Moxie and his team, understanding the plight of the country and understanding these Bahamian, understanding the technicalities of the structure of BPL and its necessities, decided to think outside the box. They realized that, hey, we need to play the game called hedging. Hedging would allow us to be able to lock in prices of fuel that we need to generate energy. And based on the price, we lock it in. We hold that price for a predetermined amount of time. So even if, as we saw doing the road projects, you know, the one they said, singing the song, the road them dig up, dig up, dig up. Remember that part? We found that a project that I believe was supposed to be $50 million, when a political decision was made, no, we ain't doing that before the election, ballooned into over $150 million. And that was because fuel went from $60 a barrel up to $120. And you know, asphalt and all that was so you had to adjust. And in the examples that Ryan Pinder gave in relation to electricity generation, these are true. I'm not telling people shut down. I'm encouraging them to listen to what Ryan Pinder say, because that's, and I'm saying this respectfully, that's the old story you got to get. That will put you in a better position to appreciate any kind of move that need to be made. With the generating capacity, which is so strong, and the line capacity cannot hold it, so we end up with leakage, and guess what? You still have to pay for the leakage that it doesn't even reach you. The same way with the road project. When Mr. Ingram got criticized, he moved it from a road project to an infrastructural project. Because at that time, water and sewage was going through the exact same thing. How many of y'all remember driving along those trenches, and we found cast iron pipes look like clogged up arteries with rust? I personally believe that that might have been a trigger for a lot of cancer in our country, because those waters and those means was terrible. I remember that going down Prince Charles and east, the water used to be drip, drip, drip. So we installed, the government of the Bahamas, we installed 32-inch means. That means huge in diameter, running straight down Prince Charles. We used, infrastructure was installed underneath so that you don't have to dig up the roads as much as possible. And we saw the benefit of it at the end of the day. But that plan was made known. I clearly remember when there was, at that time, objections from the then opposition In particular, our current Prime Minister, Philip Brave Davis, about the road works. And I remember specifically seeing an interview on TV, and I followed up, and he was in the room with the IDB, who said that, because he was complaining about the further refinancing of the road work and expansion of it, and the cost overruns. And the IDB, with him sitting right there, said that, listen here, we are not in the business of financing government's cost overruns. But the benefit of this project far exceed the cost. That's why they were providing the funds. Why did I bring all that up? Because it's the same thing that is really happening right now. So Donovan Doe's decide to help the Bahamian people with the hedging, and we could not qualify because of the junk status we were pushed into from the administration before. When we finally reached junk status, yes, we did. Over the 4 years, we went over this before, of the administration, the country even had a -1 growth rate, and we collapsed into junk status. And so what ended up happening was that the Bahamian operated board came up with an innovative idea. They went over to the IDB, who in the rating system is rated as a country in and of itself, who has a AAA rating, and say, listen here, we want to hedge these things. In order to hedge, we weren't qualified because of our rating. And we used the credibility of the IDB to purchase the hedge on behalf of the Bahamas government. And because the IDB don't deal with the small boys, it deals with countries, not corporations, it had to be signed off by the Prime Minister on behalf of the country, and that's when we saw the tremendous rate decrease. And God so blessed us, you know, because that was during the time of COVID and everything else. So the hedging brought that about, even though there was the first phase of infrastructural upgrades with the generation, the additional generation. But we all know that that's just one component. Distribution, transmission, and further upgrades that was needed, but it was on the way. And then we understand the debacle about the hedging and confusion. And if Ryan say lie, I can follow him because he's senior me. Can't do that. I got to be okay. The untruth of about who cancel the hedging, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now we reach to the point that despite the argument, despite everything else, we have now a proposal that the most of it is historical information, but the beef of it is what you're going to do now and how you're going to do it, and show us the plan. The IDB backed us with the hedging because they saw a plan. They saw a direction. Right now, there is no clear plan. We're seeing something that is being done. But to have a clear plan to make you feel the hope, because we've been around the merry-go-round with BPL for far too long. And we cannot simply be motivated by the fact that we're promising you low bills, low bills, low bills. There comes a point in time and the person keep coming to you for money and he ain't bringing nothing. You got to say, show me the plan this time, because your word ain't mean nothing. And I speak about governments. The country needs something that they could really believe in, to understand and know completely what is happening. Yes, I understand negotiations and everything else, but we need to know. And the reason why there should be a delayed celebration even with this bill, because even things in this bill, before it could even have its function actuated in law, there is still more legal work to be done in order for even the things in here to come into effect. And that had to be done with the Electricity Act. Then we have further confusion when bills were submitted and the language in the original one give a strong impression, and some will say was an undermining of IRCA. But then amendments was made, that was polished up, and now we're here. We just need to know and understand the plan. Because I, for one, personally think, and have always thought, and said it then and said it now, that some of the actions that BPL is doing to individuals is criminal. Let me tell you why I say it's criminal. How you can come and average my bill? and then want to hit me for what you want. And knowing that the bill that you average also is used to calculate the fuel. How I know you ain't ripping me off? And don't come tell me you trying to save costs on workers because you can read in every house. But it's stop, we need, what my bill is, I want to pay my bill. And I don't mind a couple somewhere going to help my brothers in the family islands, but I ain't want to pay a bill, you guessing. Not only that, I would like for it to be in here, I saw it with some other things. Why is it when they blow my 100-inch TV, jack up my electric fridge, and I got to go to the same culprit and say, you got to come, and you got to pay me, and then they ignore me or offer me $20?
That's a big wall, man.
Yes, it is. You see what I'm saying? So now you understand when small people sacrifice for what they need, it's a value to them because your 870, your 1075-inch TVs is not a problem because it's rich to you. My one 110-inch, 100-inch TV is there to cover my whole family because we live in one room and everybody needs to see the screen and we burn with 2 candles because we can't pay the electricity bill, which is a result of bad decisions. We are paying the results of bad decisions. Then we have from our Prime Minister who made the C rate hike and then kicking all the other hikes as automatic hikes. So I ain't going to tell you because I tell you it last year, so you forget the rate hike come from me, so you don't have to keep beating the face. And he learned that from COVID, you know. One of the things that Prime Minister Menace was that he became the face of COVID. If I was him, I would let Carl Battle and Dr. Del Regis come and say, you're locked down. And then I'll come out and say, thou art free. Because the psychology of the Bahamian people is, no matter what it is, they're going to gauge you by who said. We are the Bahamian people, we do kill the messenger. So let somebody else told the news. So Prime Minister Davis learned that let me drop this bad news once and let him know it's also going to happen but 4 more times up the road. But as I tell you this once, when the rates hit you again, yeah, somebody else get the beating, but you won't see in my face doing it. That was brilliant because even now we expecting what, about 2 more rate hikes? Over and over and over and over again. And it's even in the fuel charge. And the thing with BPL is so amazing. Oh, we didn't increase the rate. Oh, it's just the fuel charge that went up. You see, that ain't our fault. And that ain't our fault. When the fuel surcharge, in many instances, end up being equivalent to your bill. And that's, I think, one of the hardest pill that the people have to follow because they had a glimpse of how if we regulate the fuel charge through the hedging mechanism, we could save off the bill without even changing the rate, simply because we could save on the cost of fuel. And we biting the bullet because of that. Right now, I can see the effort being made with BPL. The effort is diminished because you can't appreciate the full scope of it through the lack of the plan really being completely laid out. And then not only that, you have to overcome the struggle of the lack of faith and lack of confidence through what we've been witnessing during the course, even in particular of this administration. But what I would lead you with is this. We all know the problem. We all live the problem. I sincerely hope for success. I don't care what direction it comes from. I hope for success even if I can't support it because I don't believe it. I still want it to work. And I want to support it because I need to understand what I'm supporting. See, we tend to make people who have reasonable questions enemies. Whereas they're not enemies. They just want understanding because they've been down this road before over and over again. So I look forward to the times when an announcement could be made for us to be able to grasp the whole of this, when some guarantees could be presented, when the necessary amendments to the electric arc can be made that will facilitate some of these things, when information could be presented as relate to the role that the unions play in all of this, and how our strategic players can be. We speak about the 2030 goal, which is a real goal, a goal. That's the international thing, which we just adopt. And it's a good goal, which everybody adopted. But I'm not so sure how well that's going to work. We know that in New Providence, that's going to be, especially with the solarization, contextually a non-starter, and possibly could work. A non-starter because when you calculate the acreage per kilowatt that you need in solar panel, there's nowhere in Nassau we have that kind of land to wait. We don't have that unless you put it all over the well fields and everything else. That's what I'm saying. When you put, I just said, unless you put it over all the well fields and everything else for the generation capacity. Yeah, I'm well aware. I follow it. No, that's why. If you listen to what I'm saying, I said can't be done. And I said there's a possible way that it should be done. It can't be done traditionally because of the land mass and capacity unless you, and as soon as I was saying, unless you put them over the well field. Then we have environmental issues and all that thing to struggle with. We don't use the well fields. You'll be surprised. Because you don't use the well field doesn't mean they're not habitats. And the water table. So let me tell you why I wanted to stop it there. Let's not signal to the environmentalists and some that are bullied unnecessary discussion till you're ready to discuss that. I'm just simply saying it's not cut and dry. Let's just agree with you. See what I'm saying? It's not cut and dry. Because at the rate of pollutions of our water table, remember the road works? If it wasn't for them road works, we wouldn't have found out how many of them gas stations been poisoning. Remember Marathon? The whole of Marathon. If it wasn't the road works, you wouldn't have discovered that. You see what I'm saying? We would not have known how much gas leakage and how much contaminated area, people getting sick in communities, and so on and so forth. So what I'm simply saying is, I'm stating the reality of the possibilities, and some discussions you want to have closer to the time. It is a possibility if the government, let me finish the first with land. Now in the Family Islands, it's excellent potential. Abaco and some of them get land gone for days. And you can build hurricane-resilient solar systems on the ground. And I think is it Meg Warner, that the former FNM administration actually did the first solarization of an island. So we already have an example of a solarized, solar power, ecologically powered island right now in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, in the southern Bahamas. It's there, And so how it is possible is that if we allow infrastructure to be placed on the roofs of the human houses, and they could generate, but the problem with that is, again, you need the system to make sure people don't get robbed. And so the money, the generation that they pull in from the solar panels on their houses into the system, that they can properly regulate, properly monitor those so people get a fair cut. Because when a resident pays possibly up to $30,000 to properly solarize his house, and they send it back to BPL, they want to have proper value for their buck. So maybe the government may have to even consider and see, this is the problem. Financing the solar array on a person's house. Then it becomes government infrastructure and saying, listen here, you are guaranteed free electricity. Remember, you all offered free electricity before, to the extent that the solar power on your house generates, and anything over you pay. Because for everybody, or the majority of people to pay for the level of solar infrastructure is something you need to think about. What I'm simply saying is that there are many reasons, there are many ways around it, but most importantly right now, and I'll end this thought on this point, it's also a matter of trust.
That's right.
So let us, Minister, you're too young, you're too young, you're too young, you're too young, you're too young. All right? And with that, on that topic, I digress. And my apologies to you, Mr. AG, because actually from last night where I was supposed to send you a message because I wanted something for you to feedback on. So apologize for just saying that. You know what I will do? I could actually just read it, a message, all right? All right, it's nothing thing, but you try help on this before. You know, in relation to this is very important to a lot of people, okay? Pardon me. Pinewood Nassau Village, the land issue there, you've given a report. I think that might have been last year on it, so on and so forth. And we need to get an update on that. Then I want to remind you too, there were some persons who also was a primary Pinewood area who had that struggle, and their land issue was a struggle, wasn't properly sorted out, but they themselves couldn't get utilities because you got to prove ownership. And I remember you saying that there was a mechanism that they could have gotten it even if you hadn't finished signing all the dots across, and T's and marking the T's in their document. There would have been a way to get them. It would be good public knowledge if you could articulate that, and if there's some method in which they can get that information to deal with it. Because we have some persons here, I'll give it a courtesy. She had asked, say, hey, reference Nassau Village, Pinewood property owners. There's very little movement on the resolution. Promise made, but no action. We were told to bring in documents, which was done. Then told the information was sent to our homes. This is even before you, so she got a long history. Our homes to produce deeds, and then told the documents were sent to Inland Revenue, and now vice versa, you see me language stuff, with no end in sight. I was told by Ms. Edwards, Attorney General Office, about 2 weeks ago that my name is on the list to be sorted out. People are now frustrated and agitating. We need help. So I always let them know the actions that you were taking, but I think it was yeah. So I don't, the next sitting, if you're not prepared now, we can give them a nice solid update. Okay. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think that, just making sure in my head, I think that is all, and I rest.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Senator the Honorable Ruben Raming. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Quinton Lightbourne.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the business of the Senate do sit beyond the 1 p.m. hour.
Is there a seconder? Second. It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate sit beyond the lunch period. As many as are in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion is agreed. The business of the Senate will sit beyond the 1 o'clock hour. As many, Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Quinton Lightbourne.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for allowing me to present this afternoon on 2 bills that would change the landscape of our nation for generations to come. 2 significant pieces of legislation before us are intended to positively impact the energy sector that continue to present to us many challenges. But before I start my presentation, I would definitely like to say a special happy birthday, I would say, to my political mother, Miss Lula Mae Smith. I just wanted to say happy birthday to you, Miss Smith. All of us in here know Miss Lula Mae, So, grew up in the same Flamingo Gardens area. I've known you most of my life, and thank you very much for your support and your service to politics in this country. We are in an energy crisis, and this crisis did not come about overnight. Rather, it has been building for years, and no administration before this one has seriously addressed it. Let me lay context for the Bahamian people. Bahamas Power and Light, our primary electricity provider, is burdened by $500 million in debt and old infrastructure. This was caused not just by one party, but by successive governments. And we can no longer kick the can down the street. Action must be done now. Our objectives are clear. We want to lower light bills for Bahamian families and businesses. We want to ensure that electricity supply is more suitable and more reliable so that power outages are a thing of the past. And we want to drive our country's transition to cleaner energy. Mr. Chairman, this Davis administration is resolute in our mission to improve the energy industry for the benefit of all Bahamians. I would like to mention the Paradise Park in Jamaica. In June 2018, an investment company acquired a shareholding in Paradise Park, also known as 8 Rivers Energy Company. It is a 51 megawatt peak solar park in Jamaica, and it has secured a project finance of approximately $50 million from the French and Dutch Development Bank. And in June of 2018, construction began, and in June of 2019, the park was completed. The Paradise Park is the largest solar park plant in our region, covering over 220 acres of land, and is the cheapest producer of energy on that island. These are the kind of projects that we need to establish in our country. There are islands in our country who have been plagued by antiquated equipment, and keeping electricity on is sometimes a daily challenge. Change cannot be done with inaction. New ideas and a different outlook on how to solve these issues are needed. Projects like these can provide full power to islands like Inagua and Maguana in the south that have an average of just 54 days of rain per year. So, in essence, there is an abundance of sunlight that can power, like we do in Paradise Park, to solarize and fully power our islands in the south. This is how we change the energy conversation in our country, with profound technological improvements that reduce our dependence on fossil fuel. I'm a firm believer that solar and renewable energy is the future for our country. The cost of fossil fuel is out of control, and we all fall victims to this erratic increase during the summer months. Pilot solar projects are being looked on right now on Family Islands, and as we speak, the Minister of Energy and Transport will be traveling to the island of Auckland next week, and I will be accompanying her to look at microgrid projects to do on these Family Islands. I will give you a story on Southern Islands, on when the weather is bad and if fuel cannot get down to these Southern Islands. You know what happens? No electricity. No power. So these are things that the government is doing to improve that situations. For the sake of the Bahamian people, we must act, and we cannot fail. And believe it or not, we will not fail. Mr. Chairman, energy is important for development and advancement of any country. Development is about reducing poverty and about increasing access to basic needs to allow people the freedom to grow and thrive. As leaders in both the upper and lower house, it is incumbent on us to develop an energy policy that addresses the urgency that is in front of us. With the Electricity Bill 2024, we are repealing and replacing the Electricity Act and repealing the Minister's Administration electricity rate, reducing Bond Act, which promised funding but never materialized. This bill will ensure that ERCA will have regulatory oversight over renewable energy and promotes the adoption of efficient energy practices. ERCA will also act as an arbitrator should any disputes arise between licensees and a third party. No more political football would take place that will allow any unforeseen problems in the future. The existing rates will be maintained for the next 3 years. During that time, BPL will conduct a tariff review to ensure that the rates are fair and equitable for all consumers. If BPL is of the view that rates need to be changed within the next 3 years, they must submit a rate case to the ERCA review. This bill clearly outlines the rights and duties of licensees and gas service workers. This includes specific requirements for duties of gas transporters, gas retailers, and health and safety requirements. The Natural Gas Bill 2024 includes a provision for consumer protection, as every public gas supplier must submit to ERCA for approval, a plan that should outline the standards for the protection of its gas consumers. The Energy and Natural Gas Bill 2024 has been tabled, and no one or no concern has been expressed in the media about a possible rise in the electricity tariff and the role of ERCA. I ask the side opposite to not just oppose for opposition's sake, but to take a thorough look and understand the gravity of this problem that we have at hand. No more scare tactics are needed. No one will lose their jobs, and pension commitments will be met by this New Day administration. In our blueprint for change, we stated that we would recommit the Bahamas to at least 30% of renewable energy by 2030. The establishment of a comprehensive plan for BPL and to transition to low-carbon energy sources, including liquid natural gases, also known as LNG, which is lower carbon than HFO and diesel and other renewables. We have stayed the course and stayed true to our blueprint for change. We pledge to use both solar and LNG to meet those 2030 goals. This is a monumental undertaking by this government, the most ambitious energy reform agenda over our country's history. And with that, Mr. Chairman, the Electricity Bill 2024 and the Natural Gas Bill 2024 have my unreserved support as an important step for the right direction for our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator the Honorable Quentin Lightbourne, for your contribution. As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Darren Henfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to join earlier comments to indicate that you wear the chair well. I'd also like to add that I think we do more judicious business, and you are constrained by the chair.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
We pray for your appointment.
As the judge is unable to engage in the arena, as such, yeah, as such, you know. I'd also like to take this time, Mr. Chairman, to extend Happy Mother's Day to all of those wonderful mothers who are there. This is going to be our last opportunity to do so from this place, and particularly my wife Deidre, who's given me 3 sons and 2 beautiful granddaughters, who are my pride and joy. My mother has since gone on to the other place, but she's left many children, many of whom are daughters, who are mothers in their own rights, and extend to them as well, and all of the mothers of my lovely island of Abaco. Some of whom, there's a mother I have, Esther Bethel, who's adopted me. She's from Eleuthera, then she got married and moved to Green Trail Key. She now lives in Grand Bahama. But she is my mother, and so I extend to her as well. And to all of you mothers in this place, a happy, happy Mother's Day. You know, the AG, as he moved this bill, indicated that this law will cause us to be able to add 60 to 100 megawatts of solar energy to energy supply in the Bahamas. I found it curious because, I'm sorry he stepped out, because in October 2022, the Prime Minister said exactly the same thing. From a statement I read from his statement that is headed, statement by the Honorable Philip Davis KC MP, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, concerning the increase in fuel tariff being introduced by the Bahamas Power and Light. And I quote from this document, I will lay it at the end. The Prime Minister is quoted as saying the launch of a 60 megawatt solar farm in New Providence in the next 12 months means that approximately 25 to 30% of the island's electricity needs will come from solar, resulting in less expensive, cleaner energy for residents. That was October 2022. So a year from then would have been October 2023. And so we're now approaching, Lord willing, October 2024. And so I don't know if that ever materialized, and so I hope the AG's promise of adding to the grid will materialize. We're not supporting these bills today because we believe that these bills should have had, they're too important to the development of the Bahamas, that it would be treated in such a dismissive fashion by coming to these places and rush through without the involvement or engagement of the Bahamian community all across this country, to have broad discussions and to let them know what is going on. And so we're not prepared to give this government a blank check by supporting these bills today. And so we won't support them. And you left us no choice because we keep asking questions. We ask questions about BPL. We ask questions about what you're going to do with BPL, how you're going to dismantle BPL. And you saw yesterday in the House of Assembly, you know, where the cameras. Over here.
can't afford them in here. Right there.
You saw yesterday in the House of Assembly the Prime Minister dodges questions. Most of the questions put to him by the Leader of the Opposition were concerning what's going to happen with BPL. The Minister herself, I copied something that the Minister was quoted as saying yesterday. I'm not prepared to answer those questions today, but I will assure the member for Marco City that after the F&M convention, I found that curious after the convention, I will be in a better position to answer those questions. This is a minister responsible for a very important sector of our country, of energy. And you know, I keep hearing the refrain over there when I listen to that other place about who answered questions and who didn't. That's a new day, man. That's a new day.
Every day.
Why we keep going back to the old days, right? And then you know, there are some of us who answered questions. You can go to the Hansard and review my record, as you can review the Leader of the Opposition's record. I think he made it clear. We stood and answered questions on the floor immediately, because we understood it to be a duty that ministers who look after the affairs of a ministry, you got to answer questions. Question about that. And so that's why we won't support this bill today. We believe that there should be more discussion. And I heard my good friend say, you know, sometimes people are accused, they accuse Christie of too much consultation. You know, but we got to find that sweet spot somewhere in the middle, where, you know, it's difficult sometimes to know when or how, but governments have to, in the 21st century we're in now, people ain't gonna stand for that no more. You have to come and say to people what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why you think it's in their beneficial interest. As I believe, you know, as difficult as it is for us to vote against these, to say no, because these are very necessary bills. But we can't give you a blank check. You don't know what you're going to do with BPL. And so I feel the audacity of you, the audacity of you to come here in this new day and to ask us to support this bill is nothing short of being disrespectful, unaccountable, careless, and almost even uncaring. Because these bills deserve fulsome discussions. Yeah, I remember when Prime Minister Ingram and his cabinet determined to sell BTC. Right? Determined to sell BTC. But I didn't hear you say you ain't selling nothing, you know. And I never heard anybody say y'all ain't selling nothing. And that's a concern for us. Because if you're selling, you should tell us who you're selling which parts to. These are things we want to know. And so, Mr. Chairman, it's clear to me and many other Bahamians that this government don't feel they have to answer to the Bahamian people. But I tell them, as I tell them every time I come here, how they coming. How they coming, boy, when the Bahamian people will tell you exactly who you answer to. Now, you know, maybe they have already done the cost-benefit analysis on that and say, well, so let it be. I don't know. But that day coming. Both of these bills hold the potential to change the way we treat with energy in the Bahamas. Both of them. And no serious discussions with the Bahamian people is intolerable. Cannot be that we just come to Parliament, run through these bills, put our stamp of approval on them, and say this is what's going to happen. I can't help but marvel at the audacity of this new day, PLP administration, who would bring these bills to Parliament to be debated in the face of a pending sale of BP